Welcome to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. We're tackling miscommunication with the power of understanding. We're growing our mastery of the foundation of teamwork and of all relationships. And so I want to ask you to help me spread the word about stronger, more effective communication by inviting some friends to listen along with you. Then discuss what you've learned and give me your feedback. What would you like to hear from us in future episodes so we can make this podcast even more effective? Thanks for joining me. Let's jump in. This week, I want to talk for a little bit about a concept that's really been on my mind recently, and that is this. The quote is simply that when you teach, you learn more deeply. I think it was Joseph Joubert said, to teach is to learn twice. And obviously in my line of work, I do a lot of teaching of others in how to communicate and how to communicate more effectively. And I've been able to apply some of the principles I'm going to talk about this week. As I've done that, I've found it very beneficial, but I want to recommend it to you as well, that you not just learn about communication, but you look for ways to pass on what you're learning, because then you learn it more deeply. So in this episode, we're going to talk first of all about the connection between teaching and deeper learning, but then also look at how does that enhance our communication skills. And I've got some practical takeaways for you before we finish. So let's talk about, first of all, why teaching deepens learning. There's a cognitive psychology perspective on this, that explaining something to somebody else requires me to process it more deeply. Something's going on in my brain and in my mental process that helps it to go more deeply into my understanding. It's called the Feynman technique in the technical language, which it simply says this: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And so to be able to explain something so someone else can understand it causes me to engage with it at a deeper level. And so my own understanding is getting deeper as well. And there's a benefit in our communication of doing that. First of all, to teach somebody else forces that clarity of thought and expression. You have to be thinking about what am I going to say and how am I going to say it so that this other person can hear it, receive it, understand it, apply it in an effective way. That requires adaptation that we talk about so often on the podcast, doesn't it? But then also communication benefit number 2 would be that teaching someone else builds empathy. We begin to understand what it is that the listener doesn't know, and how we can convey what we know to the listener in a way that will help them. It increases our empathy, and empathy is always something that fuels deeper and more effective communication. So when I'm teaching somebody else about communication, it's deepening my learning. And I recommend it to you as a way of deepening your understanding of communication as well. Your business is a wheel with many, many spokes. From leadership and management to customer relations and marketing, communication is the hub of that wheel that causes everything else to work effectively. It makes the wheel turn when communication is working well. So oil the wheel of your business by focusing on communication IQ. Strengthen collaboration, provide exceptional customer support, boost sales performance, even facilitate effective learning. Contact me today and let's get your business moving forward faster without misunderstanding. There are communication skills that are enhanced when we teach others. There's 4 I can think of right off the bat. First off, active listening grows when we teach somebody else, because good teaching has to start with understanding your audience. And so unless you're listening to the person or the group that you want to convey the information to, you're not going to be effective in connecting with them to pass on what it is that you know. The second skill that grows as we learn to teach others is adaptability, and the whole area of being clear in what I'm saying. The clarity of my teaching has to come from being able to adapt to those I'm teaching. I have to adjust my message based on the feedback that I'm getting. So this ties in with the active listening. I want to ask for feedback and receive feedback on, did that make sense? What stood out to you? What did you hear from what I just said? Those kind of techniques. and then adjusting what I say next time in order to address any areas of misunderstanding or miscommunication. The third area that grows in communication as I'm teaching others is the whole area of non-verbal communication cues, because I need to also use my own tone of voice, my body language, facial expressions, even hand motions. You see, I'm doing it as I'm talking to you now. All of those things, including visuals, maybe a chart or a picture that helps to reinforce what I want to convey. But also I'm aware of the tone and the posture of the people who are listening to me. Do they look glazed over? Are they engaged? Are they nodding? Are they shaking their heads? Do they look puzzled? Do they look confused? Are they disengaged? All of those things, those non-verbal communication cues, grow when I'm trying to convey something to somebody else in a way that will benefit them. And then the fourth area of communication skill that's enhanced through teaching others is the whole area of confidence. It builds your confidence to teach somebody else something that you yourself have learned. It strengthens your self-expression. It also strengthens your public speaking skills, if that's an area that you need to grow in. If public speaking fills you with horror, maybe try teaching one or two people something that you've learned from this podcast and see how it grows your confidence in addressing larger groups down the line. So the communication skills really grow. Let me give you an example, a practical example that applies some of this. I remember a friend of mine who was a client as well. His name was Patrick. And Patrick was promoted to lead a new team within his organization, his company. And his company encouraged leadership development. And so he was asked to mentor a junior colleague who had recently assumed a project management role. So he's leading the new team, and now he's mentoring a junior colleague who's managing a project for the first time. And so at first, Patrick felt very confident in that whole new role. He'd just been promoted and he had years of experience. But then as he started to teach his mentee how to manage conflict with his team, to how to set priorities for the project they were working on, how to communicate across departments so that there wasn't this siloed effect, he really realized that he'd never really defined those skills for himself. So Patrick get a revelation trying to help somebody else that he was lacking in those same areas. In trying to explain his process to this junior colleague, he uncovered some habits that he'd developed unconsciously, and some of them were helpful, but many of them were not. And he needed to address his own work skills in those areas. So through the mentoring process, Patrick realized that he often avoided direct conversations if there was tension in the relationship or in the room. And when his mentee started asking him very simple, direct questions that made him reflect more deeply, he realized that he'd never been trained to do that, but this mentoring process was bringing out of him or introducing him to a process that was more helpful, to be direct and simple and clear. So that experience didn't just help the mentee grow in his skills as a junior team leader, but it also transformed Patrick's leadership style. It made him more intentional. It made him more honest with those he was leading, and it made him more effective. Patrick spoke to me later after this whole episode, and he said, I forget exactly how he said it, but he said something like this: I thought I was teaching him how to lead, but I learned how to lead better myself by teaching him. And that's what I love about teaching. It helps me to learn more deeply. And so let's talk about some practical takeaways that you can apply in your life and that I've learned in mine. Simple ways to practice teaching in everyday life so that I can learn more deeply because I'm teaching. The first thing to do would be maybe to explain what you've learned to a friend. Just grab a friend, maybe go for coffee or just get a few minutes together and say, hey, let me explain to you something I learned the other day, because I'm growing in teaching as learning. And so as you explain what you're learning to a friend, you'll get feedback, and it'll be a non-threatening setting for you to begin that. Another thing you can do would be to create a blog or a podcast where you start to tell others what you've learned, just as I've been doing through this podcast about communication. Or you could volunteer to lead or mentor a small group in some setting. Maybe that would be at work if your work has those kinds of groups. Or maybe it's in the community. Maybe the local library is looking for somebody to start a small group discussion around some area that is your expertise. If you volunteer to lead a small group in that way, you'll find yourself practicing teaching just in your everyday life. And then as you start to practice teaching, I've got a few tips for you about how you can be effective in teaching as learning. The first would be to stay curious and to stay humble, because if I'm always certain that I know all the answers, I'm not open to receiving fresh input, fresh understanding. I'm not open to feedback often when I think I'm right. If I'm more curious, what more can I learn? What might I have misunderstood? How can I refine this to be even clearer for others? I don't want to be prideful. I want to remain in an accurate understanding of my own expertise and not to inflate it to believe my own publicity, if you like. So stay curious, stay humble is a very important tip as we start to teach others. But then also in your interaction with those that you're teaching, ask for questions, ask for feedback. What did you learn from what we just talked about? Or what do you still need clarity on? Or is there some part of this that still doesn't make sense? Or how did I say that in a way that impacted you? If you see a response in somebody, you're learning from the responses of those you're teaching. And then when you've concluded any particular teaching moment or teaching session, reflect for yourself as well. Was there anything in that session that surprised you? Maybe there was something that you thought you understood completely, and the people you're trying to pass it on to were completely blank about it and just didn't land at all. Or conversely, something that you thought was insignificant, they were like, oh wow, that's amazing. Was there a surprise in the session that you can learn from? But also, what could be clearer the next time you teach it? Is there something you can adjust so that you can teach more effectively? So let me recap just briefly what we've talked about. First of all, teaching is not just sharing knowledge, it's refining it, it's growing it, it's cultivating it. So it's not just that I know everything and I want to pass it on to you and then see if you've captured it completely. It's I want to pass on to you what I've learned, and as I do that, I'm learning more and getting your feedback that increases my understanding of this area or challenges areas that might be blind spots for me. And then secondly, teaching strengthens your communication toolkit because you are having to adapt to somebody else or maybe a group of people in order for them to understand and receive and benefit from the experience or the expertise that you are passing on to them. So let me challenge you to do something with this week's episode. Maybe pick one thing that you've learned recently and try teaching it to someone this week. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. And I'd love to hear from you. What happened when you did that? Were they receptive? Did you learn some more? How did your understanding of that topic or that subject grow because you taught it to somebody else? So use the text me link in the show notes to give me your feedback, tell me your story, and also pass on your questions. What questions do you have about teaching as learning? And remember that you can come back each week here and we'll continue to develop our communication mastery. So go find somebody to teach something to and then let me know how it went. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean a lot to me if you'd rate and review the podcast so it helps more listeners to find us. But also, would you give me your feedback on things you'd like to hear about in future episodes? And remember to share the episode with a friend if you see something that would benefit them as well. You can reach me with feedback through my website at markburlinson.com. Just click on the contact button and send me a message. I respond to everyone personally, and I really want to hear from you. So thank you again for listening, sharing, reviewing, and giving me your feedback.